So when we're ready to print, we're going to take our block off that dirty paper, put it aside, remove our tape, make sure our hands are clean because we don't want to get fingerprints on our print. And then we'll take our print and we're just going to take those tacks, those thumbtacks, just like before, and we're going to put them through, but just kind of a little bit, not all the way through. And then we line our tacks up with the holes and push them through nice and tight. And hold that paper up so you don't put it down too quickly. Just take your spoon and kind of push the paper down around those tacks. And it should line up exactly where it was before. Right. So you'll notice when you're hand burnishing this time, it might be a little bit tougher than last time. You might get a little bit more resistance. And so you might need to switch to not burnishing directly on top of this paper. So I probably either switch to like a scrap piece of newsprint that's clean, but then it's kind of difficult to see what you're doing and where you're going. So I've got a little piece of tracing paper, wax paper works too, and that kind of helps you see where you're going. The parts that you're going to want to concentrate on, this should, the first layer has a lot of flat areas, so it can be tricky to not get a salty print out of it, and it should get easier as you carve or reduce down your block because there's more detail areas and there's less flats. But if you have flat areas, you're going to want to concentrate in those for a couple minutes while you're burnishing to make sure that they don't end up salty. So I gotta kind of concentrate on those edges because those edges have a little kind of dark framework to them. If you notice from your first print that you're getting a lot of like vertical or horizontal or diagonal streaks, it's probably because you were going back and forth like this too much. You want to do little circular motions so you don't end up with those streaks through it. And I know my largest flat areas now is that circle around the skull because there's not very many details going into that circle. So that'll probably be the hardest area for me to make sure that it's not salty. Let's take a little peek and just see how we're doing. Edge is looking pretty good. It is a bit salty. I may not have had enough ink down, but we'll just kind of go back over it anyway. And because we have the registration set up on here, if you need to do another layer on top just to make sure it's solid, you should be able to pull the paper off, re-ink the block back up, and then put the paper back down using that pin registration. And that should help keep it in place. But if you notice while you're doing this, if you're going directly on the print, if you notice it starting to pick up little like fibers from the paper, then stop and make sure that you have a barrier in between the print and your spoon. Let's take another look and see. It's a little bit better. Still a little bit salty on those edges. I could spend some more time on it. Like I said before, I can always re-ink my block up and then just do the whole process again. But for the sake of making the video short, let's go ahead and take a peek at it. All right. So here is the print. This is the second layer. Let me back that camera up a little bit. And then this was just with that first layer. This is a little bit of a darker orange that I had printed, but so you get that first layer, second layer look on there. So I do see some issues with saltiness if you look up close down at the bottom there and then around the framework, but I think it looks pretty good for the most part. I did leave some chatter on those edges. I kind of like the way that this chatter looks. It's a little bit too much, so I might kind of go back and carve out just a little bit of those spots, but I kind of like this in here. So maybe I'll just leave that. And then when you're printing your third layer, so after you've printed your second layer on every single one of your prints, then you'll go back and you'll carve that last layer out. And that last layer is just gonna leave you with kind of the key. So like how your initial Sharpie drawing looked, you know, it's gonna have the detail areas and then the darkest shadow areas too. So that's it for printing the second layer.